We're now moving on to our next session, which is a very critical part, I believe, of any organization working within technology, is the convergence of IT and OT, which is something that's been raised quite frequently with my conversations with a number of operators. It's unifying the industrial enterprise. It's moderated by a very good friend of mine, Rob Kennedy, who's Global Director of Digital Assets and DataOps for Wood. So I'm delighted to hand over to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Adam, and good morning, good afternoon, and perhaps good evening to you all, wherever in the world you join us from today. I have to say, Achilles, that's the first time I've ever heard the word ketchup mentioned at a conference. So I think you've put this panel under a lot of pressure to leave you with something quite so memorable. So look, we've been talking about IT-OT convergence. It's one of those buzzwords, and it feels like we've been talking about it for a decade now. And it kind of feels like we should have figured it out by now, but realistically, we haven't. And I think the reason is we're trying to bring together two very, very different worlds that we've trained to operate and that we're asking different questions of as businesses, right? So, IT, it's often said that when they break things, it's in the virtual world, and OT, when they break things, it's in the physical world. So it's a case of touch nothing. If it's working, just leave it alone. So today, we're not really going to talk about generic digital transformation, but really home in on some of the challenges that I think as an industry we're facing and that we're really grappling with in some areas. That's kind of standing between us and this sort of utopian view of IT-OT convergence. And I guess there's three tensions really that keep those two worlds apart. First one is really that security versus value. And can we open the floodgates to all the data in OT, but without actually compromising the cybersecurity of the facility? Can we then, from a time perspective, we're dealing with assets that have been in operation for decades. So are we able to put AI on top of control systems that are 30, 40 years old? And finally, from a cultural perspective, we're the whole IT mindset of have you tried turning it off and on again doesn't really work when you're dealing with a world scale refinery. So there are some real challenges there. And I'm delighted today to have three experts with me who've sort of lived and breathed the reality of downstream operations. And I'll ask them to introduce themselves in just a sec. But Michel, Shahab, and Manish, I think if our conversation we had earlier this week is anything to go by, we're in for a really great panel. So I'm going to hand over to you, gentlemen, and if you could maybe tell us a little bit about yourselves and maybe some of the focus areas that you're working at the moment. So Michel, maybe I'll start with yourself.
In Belgium, based in the Brussels area. I had a chance to work close to 25 years and with exposure to both the IT and the OT side in ExxonMobil. The role that I currently have is I'm owning the digital strategy for the global manufacturing fleet for our process space. In ExxonMobil, we were already on a journey to standardize globally on common processes and common software, common solutions. That journey brought us into a great position to have global consistent data. In current context, nobody will be surprised that our mission now is to translate that data into AI accelerated solutions for value capture.
Thanks, Michel. And Shahab, I'll hand to you.
Thank you so much. I'm in the industry since last good 17 years. It started from IT, core IT, and led many transformation projects, including ERP like SAP. Then I moved towards digital transformation in combination with OT side. And during this whole tenure, I worked with the large-scale gas reservoir production facility plants, multiple production sites of natural mining production plants, and in my last assignment, I was working for one of the country's largest oil refinery. And currently, I'm associated with the assignment of development a whole digital transformation roadmap for another oil and gas JV. So a professional who started from IT and finally working with OT domain, and I actually cross section of both IT and OT since last 17 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Shahab. And last but not least, Manish, I'll hand over to you.
Hey, thank you, and greetings, everyone. My name is Manish Kumar. I have been working in the industry, OT especially, from last 13 years almost. And my core expertise lies in OT systems, and then I moved to security side. Now I have worked with almost end user OEMs, and now as a consultant, digital consultant, which is Kent. Yeah, I cover almost all life cycle of a project, either starting from concept, detail engineering, commissioning handover, and maintenance phase. So I hope I'll bring some values to this conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Manish. So to get us moving, I think, Michel, I'm going to come to you first. And I guess, I think you've set the scene nicely with your introduction. There's quite a breadth of experience on the panel here today. And I think every organization is going to be a little bit different. But from your experience, I guess, we have this tension of the security versus sort of the accessibility of data. And I'm really interested in your thoughts around, the segregation type approach and the impact that can have on business value.
Thank you, Rob. So, as mentioned, the mission we're on is to get that value at scale. For that, it's imperative. It's a must to get our OT data exposed to our enterprise zone, our IT space. The real driver for us is price to capture, is value capture from autonomous and automation, and no doubt about that. While we're doing that, while we bring our data from the OT space to the enterprise zone, we see two big value drivers that are coming along with this. The first one in value drivers in terms of protecting the company. The first element of protection is protecting our intellectual property, and it's about who gets access to what data. And at the scale at which we work, we need a security model. It's quite laborious to build a security model at the right granularity. And if then we would have to build and maintain that in every application independently, in the OT space, in the IT space, all over the place, I don't think that's feasible for us. And so one big enabler that we see is by bringing all the OT data in one common integrated enterprise data zone, we will be able to manage the security model at that data layer and make sure that the different applications can inherit that data security, so that from there we see a step up in how we protect intellectual property for the company. The other aspect where we see a secondary benefit from the mission we're on is in terms of cybersecurity, and cybersecurity specifically for plant operations. The saying we have in ExxonMobil, and I'm smiling here, it's all well intended, is we want to keep the tourists out of the OT. And with tourists, what we mean is people who join to browse around, to collect data. And it's not that they're just wasting their time, it's that they have a job to do, obviously. But the notion is we don't want people to log on the process control domain unless if it is to do something on that domain, but just to get data, that should not be a reason to log on to the process control domain. If we're able to expose the OT data in a structured, contextualized way in the enterprise zone, our global organization will get their data from there, and we see a step change reduction in our OT tourists, as we commonly call it.
Thanks, Michel. And yeah, I love that expression, OT tourists. And like everything in life, though, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? And Manish, you're a security professional. I think Michel has painted a good picture of a very mature organization that's maybe over the years tried lots of different ways. But from a pure security perspective, clearly there must be some big challenges in that approach. What's your experience having worked across a variety of different operators?
So, like Michel has mentioned, that we need data, and we need not to have the OT tourist in our PCN, process control network. So, having said that, if we need data, there are ways to bring those data out of the OT, domain, out of the OT network. Of course, access is important. Giving access is important, but giving access to the OT control is something which we really need to think back. Now, monitoring of the OT data is completely understood for the business perspective or with for the requirement of business. But when it comes to controlling any physical asset, like you mentioned, we are breaking not the virtual things but the physical things in the OT domain. So zero trust principle no more is a slogan now. We need to think at each level wherever we are bringing data from OT to IT, at each level, whether it is at the system level or a data level or a network level. Every level has to be checked. The zero trust principle has to be implemented properly. Network has to be segmented. Role based access control has to be defined. Data severity security has to be taken care well. So these are the different and endless checklist which we need to have when we try to bring any data from OT, because we are not only bringing the data, rather we are giving a door for malicious intentions to get into the OT domain, which we cannot afford. We cannot afford downtime in OT for sure. It's a period. So AI can access OT data, no doubt, but it should not have the control. AI should not have control to the OT layer. Rather, it should be have a validation of human in between. That's how I think.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Manish. And I guess from a pure security perspective, I think it's a very reasonable and very defensible picture that you paint. I guess from a value perspective, though, and I guess kind of somewhat harking back to Michel's point from earlier, Shahab, I'm going to come to you, and I guess from that picture that Manish has just painted, this kind of one-way flow of data, kind of AI being able to maybe help you interpret and the data coming from your facility, but really, kind of limiting perhaps your ability to influence the operation of the plant in anything approaching real time. Do you think we're missing a big opportunity? And do you think it's something that we need to continue to really try and push as an industry to get to a point where we can allow some level of influence of AI back into the process control network and onto the plant?
Just Manish mentioned, when it comes to AI, you cannot do industrial AI in a air-gapped environment. For that, because when it comes to industrial AI, you need high frequency of OT data. Probably to run a whole AI model, you need some contextual data from ERP system, from enterprise layer, from IT systems, and continuous feedback loops into the model. But when it comes to OT, one isolated plant, one segmented plant, one plant who is not exactly shipping the data at the real time cannot add value for the analytics perspective, or especially when it comes to the predictive analytics or AI model. You cannot make most of it out of it. And I witnessed it in multiple production plant site, refinery plants, pipeline networks, and a few pharmaceutical plants as well. uh, as far as the solution is concerned, it doesn't mean that open the plant is solution, but exactly as just Manish mentioned, that the zero trust architecture is, or the layer architecture, is a go-to stream for today. And it's a must to do thing when it comes to any oil and gas organization, or any organized oil and gas infrastructure. Then your one-way communication diodes, outbound diodes, could be another thing which can ship data from OT to your IT, or into the centralized lake, as Michel mentioned, to create the contextual data provisioning for AI or predictive maintenance. Then a provisioning of very hardcore, hardened, port hardened, and whitelisted DMZ environment. These three aspects are really important. Um, and yes, to just conclude it, uh, um, if we isolate or air gapped our industrial plants, our industry, our production sites, they will be safe, but they can never be intelligent. So to make them intelligent, we need to set some frameworks, some protocols of data shipment across the boundaries.
Yeah, great insights, Shahab, and I think you make a great point. You know, that it's yeah, that intelligent plant, I think, is the ideal. It's where we're all aiming for. And I guess, though, on that same vein, right, we want an intelligent plant, but we're dealing with plants that potentially are 20, 30, 40 years old. And I guess the realities of larger downstream facilities is that there's continuous sort of stream of upgrades, addition of new units, and with that, of course, you're layering in different generations of control systems of OT. So, with that backdrop of the complexity, how realistic is it that we someday get to an intelligent plant for an existing brownfield asset, or are we really only going to be able to do that for a brand new sort of greenfield facility? So Shahab, I'll hand back to you on that one.
All right.
With your experience, do you think is it realistic that we can homogenize, I guess, that very broad, range of generations of different technologies, or are we? Is it just so complex that it's a bit of an exercise in futility, perhaps?
Yes. So when it comes to the aging plants, I witnessed plants from age from like from 20 to 40 years, and it's not limited to refineries only. I have witnessed it in large scale oil gas production facilities in multiple regions of the globe. So they all have basically three main characteristics: brownfield assets with a long life cycle of 20 to 40-year spans, then incremental upgrades over the span of time, and patchwork with multiple protocols, and maybe over the span different control philosophies. Every time you add a new compressor, new packaging in any pharmaceutical production line, a new unit, or any new pipeline skid, it creates a new level of complexity in the OT environment. So the critical point here is, or the resolution point here is that you should create a abstraction layer instead of replacing the legacy or old stuff, or to ship the data from legacy historical historians to new environment. Abstraction layer is the most important thing to, or you may create some edge gateways to create under unified name architecture. And again, as I just mentioned in previous question, we deploy contextual centralized industrial data hubs. and it contains data from maybe old SCADA system, DCS system, old PLCs, and it gives us a clean, contextualized OT data without touching the underlying control logic of any of these systems. So yeah, this is how we can operate.
Fantastic insights, Shahab. And I guess with your background, across, as you said, a wide range of different types of facilities at different ages, I'd like to now bring Michel back in. And I guess, Michel, working for ExxonMobil, who, have such a broad range of assets, upstream, downstream, midstream, of different ages, different geographies, it must be so challenging to have a consistent approach. You do this. Can you take us through, some of the considerations, some of the challenges you've seen? It'd be really interesting to get a kind of one asset owner sort of view of the world as well.
So, Robert, it's called work for a reason. It doesn't happen by itself, and so it takes a whole organization to get there. In ExxonMobil, no surprise, I do not get an endless budget, and we need to operate within an envelope, and so we are working within the constraints that we're getting. Our fleet of assets is largely brownfield. There are capital projects, there are greenfield opportunities, but the core of the challenge is in the brownfield. Saiyed mentioned edge computing. And so if we think about deploying AI, we want to deploy that at scale. That's clear on our mind. If everything is isolated, if everything is air kept, we're not going to be able to get there. So as mentioned earlier, also we made that step. This OT data will be has to be available on the enterprise zone. And one of the solutions that we see kick in is through edge computing, is where we can develop the solutions on the enterprise zone, and where time criticality is of essence, is bring the solution closer to the edge. So then you can run your solution in real time, regardless whether it's air gapped or not. It's typically in base operations, it's the latency that drives for it. Intelligent plant also brings in another aspect, is in the middle of a brownfield environment with hundreds of thousands of sensors and devices are there, and we're introducing a whole range of completely modern technology, who are cloud connected, who get their intelligence from a cloud or an enterprise analytics layer, but applied in real time in the field. Video analytics is a classic example of such technologies, where the sensor in the field, when it's video, it's capturing a ton of data, but we're interested in a number, and the number is distilled from that ton of data using a lot of compute power. That compute power can be done offline or somewhere else offshore, and get us to that number that we need. So we see a whole diversity enter in our environment. One thing that I believe all the cyber experts and all the control experts will agree with is we need clarity on our structure, clarity on our architecture, in order to be able to manage the security. If it's a free-for-all and all technologies that we like, let's plug them in, let's fire them up and connect them, and we then will struggle to stay on top of it.
Yeah, that's really good point, Michel. And actually, I'd like to bring Manish in here, because we speak a lot that the whole industry is grounded on the sort of, and I guess bringing edge computing into that, as Michel sort of alluded to, it kind of changes the paradigm. So I guess two-part question maybe, is that Purdue model still sort of fit for purpose, or do we need to kind of evolve it in the context of edge compute? Does that really change the playing field? And I guess ultimately, do you get to a point where an asset is just too old and too obsolete to even, it just doesn't make sense as a sensible investment to invest in things like edge compute?
Hey Rob, thanks. You brought the main point, which was that Purdue model, is it obsolete or should we still follow the same, right? And we were talking about, the following a framework, following a standard in OT. If now we are talking about edge computing, we are talking about, the IoT devices which directly sends data to its own respective clouds. So having Michel has highlighted about video analytics. When it comes to video analytics, and I mean, everything should be driven by the impact analysis, business value impact analysis in that sense. If it is a video analytics, I'm not sure how video analytics will be connected to OT data, but in my experience, I have seen OT or PCN is a completely different network than the CCTV network. So when it comes to historical data or live data from PCN network, the industry has not yet matured enough to deploy edge computing, which gives data from PCN and which controls PCN activities over cloud. So that's again up to the industry maturity level, or the top. It will be a top down approach where a top management or CISO and that board of directors has to take actions for implementation of certain use cases where these controls will be taken from level 4 and above. Now coming back to whether we should replace, change, or upgrade. See this I see this digital transformation is a transformative journey. It cannot be like if you change something, I mean, you will achieve your objective. I don't see in this way. Rather, it's a journey. We need to think about to implement certain use cases, what it takes in terms of system or your data or infrastructure or policy change. This has to be evaluated against the business value, what you are going to bring into the picture. Now, if the upgrade cost itself is more than what business value you are going to achieve, I'm not sure, or the asset owner will have a hard time in taking this decision whether we need to upgrade it. A legacy system, about a legacy system especially. So the most important strength of a legacy system, I do hear from different owner operators and asset custodians, asset owners, that if it and it's a very famous proverb also, if it is working, don't please do not touch, because it creates the downtime and additional pain for them. So it's again a business impact based approach where you will have to take decision whether you are going to upgrade it, whether you are going to change it, or you want to use the existing one itself with the adequacy study properly done by the respective OEMs, whether they will support the use cases. There could be chances that it's only about data, making the data available from that particular system to fetch into the another system, what Saiyed was mentioning about having a export layer in between. So you just need to export the data rather having a full synchronization and having a cross visibility inside that other system which is falling in a OT space. But vendor stops this, vendor does not support. If any product or legacy system reaches its end of life, then that's the final call as a asset owner should take, either to upgrade or replace, or have another supplementary controls or systems.
Yeah. No, it's a great insight. I guess you kind of you touched on some aspects of this as well, which is we're starting to get then into some of the cultural challenges and very different mindset, I guess, that both the OT and the IT teams bring together. And actually, I'm just keeping an eye on the Q&A here as you want. And there's two really good questions in here, which I think neatly capture some of the cultural challenges. The first of which is really speaking about, well, convergence kind of feels like we're unifying, and generally we think that means bringing two together. Maybe it's more efficient, maybe we're creating less work, but actually might it increase the workload for the teams involved? And then I guess related one is there room now increasingly for these sort of hybrid roles that actually bring some IT and some OT. So, Shahab, I'm maybe going to come to you because in preparing for the panel, you shared some really interesting insights around your organization and maybe some of the organizational changes and the organizational frameworks that you've evolved recently to really help with the cultural side of it. You can maybe give us a little bit of insight, and as well, referring back to the earlier questions, are we just making everyone's life more difficult? And, do we need to think about a new super sub who can kind of, change roles between IT and OT?
Technology, it does not fail. It's the culture which fails first. So very important thing is IT wants to run fast. Its speed is always high. It always want to get mobility of data because they're supposed to do AI. They're supposed to do some other fancy stuff. Probably they need to work on predictive analytics. But when it comes to OT, the mindset is safety first, the security first. The safety and security, cyber security aspect is the top priority, and it is the right place where organizations starts facing challenges. They start struggle, and the momentum of work stopped or halt or somehow get slow. So in couple of my recent assignment, what we so in a consulting assignment, what we actually did, that we create a new umbrella of information and digital officer under the same position. So it's not just a org structure change, it was the mindset change. It was a change or shift of behavior across the organization, in which the enterprise digital portfolio and the OT portfolio was reporting to the single authority, and was more kind of a steering committee in which cybersecurity was the mandatory part. What was its end result? Uh, IT people started to know that what is the impact of PTW, and what is exactly the role of management of change if they are going to do anything with the OT environment, and what are the risks in if they are doing any integration with respect to any live process. Uh, Vice versa, OT guys come to know the importance of data mobility and how important is the availability or rapid availability of data for any AI experimentation, for any data related stream. So it's all about, again, priority, and the end result was the negotiation between IT and OT starts decreasing, and eventually they came on a single frequency. They start talking in a single language. They start talking about one safety, one standard, and one definition of success, which was actually the ultimate goal of this whole transformation. So for me, the change is not technology. It's the culture which lead you towards the merger of this IT and OT segregation.
And it's really interesting. It's the hybrid role and a hybrid part of the organization to drive. That's really, interesting sort of approach to it. Michel, I'm going to come to you. So, obviously ExxonMobil is one of the world's largest organizations. Real change in such an organization is a challenge. I come to organization as well, and it seems like we're in a constant state of flux. How do organizations like ExxonMobil and the variety of assets that you operate, how do you try and approach that organization to try and instill the right culture, that sort of collaboration that we need between OT and IT? Is that something we try and do, globally, a rising tide lifts all ships, or we need to focus on that much more locally?
So I'm not going to claim perfection here. So let's be very, very clear on that. But we are making progress. There is a clear differentiation that remains between IT and OT, where on the OT side, we're there to operate the facility in real time with all the safety and real-time aspects to it. And so that segregation, where on the IT side, I first need to authenticate before I can log on, will not happen on the OT side. And from there, fundamentally, we have big difference. We have a price to capture. There is a clear bottom line price to capture. There is also what's in it for me, for the individual at all levels. Whether you're the top manager, whether you're middle manager, whether you're in the team executing the work, we need to offer that clarity on what's in it for me in order to get this organization with us. One of the things, back also to the earlier question about increasing workload, if we think about this, or if we would handle this by adding more and more elements into the mix, then yes, then we're going to draw on this organization, and that's not going to work. But what is really happening is by integrating at the data layer, and when we get interoperability across the different applications, different capabilities, we actually reduce the workload. Think of a couple of weeks ago, we had Thanksgiving. Amazon and all the online shops, it spike in orders. There is not a single human being in the loop for an individual order. If I look on the manufacturing side, if we take something out of a warehouse and go and have the scaffolding built and eventually install it in the field, today, reality is we still have a lot of individual steps, manual steps in an end-to-end flow, that where we're getting to, we will streamline that and we will reduce the load, the burden on the organization. That's going to be there for the people executing the work. That is going to be there for the people supporting and administrating those platforms. So while we think about this as saying, hey, new capabilities, in reality, if you look at how we're getting there, we will be able to do that with the same organization, or doing more, or a smaller organization.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And thanks for that, Michel. And we're just coming up on time. So Manish, I wanted to come to you to give you the final. And I think as a consultant working across a lot of different organizations and seeing many different ways of approaching these challenges, we've talked about security, we've talked about aging assets, we talked about the cultural challenges. In your view, and from everything you've seen, a sort of cross-section of industry, what's the single most important factor in your to successfully getting towards this utopian converged IT and OT?
So if I would like to summarize, the very first pillar is the people. So the people mindset has to change, like my fellow panelists, Shahab and Michel has already highlighted. It's people. It should be a top-down approach rather, changing something in the system. And the top-down approach I see when you have a strong why we are going to do this certain change, why we are on a transformation journey, whether it is related to AI or digitalization. If we have a strong why, which is complemented with a strong business value, then of course it will be a huge success. Unless there are a lot of digital and AI initiatives failing nowadays just because they could not figure out why we are going to do this. If they just follow. So unless you have your own why defined in terms of and complemented with a business value, you are going to succeed. There is no doubt about it. Technical and other aspects come later. They are just an enabler.
Thank you. What a wonderful way to wrap us up, Manish. Thank you very much. Thank you to Manish, Michel, and to Shahab. I think a really interesting, and Hope the audience enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day here at Future Downstream. Bye.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, I was just listening to Manish. It's interesting because I like this top-down approach. And when they started talking about, how you need to educate, it's what I said to Shane earlier, really. I do think a lot of even the points that were raised in that Q&A, and also some of the main points that were raised in the opening panel, it's really interesting how they submerge again, or they come up again with different people and different organizations. So clearly there's a sort of there's some synonymous themes. I think talking about data maturity is a blocker, and also how you need to really get everyone's buy-in when you go onto this transformational journey. I think that's probably something I'm taking away from every panel. It's so important to get everyone's buy-in, sort of to make them feel wanted, to make them feel, look, it's not about we're going to take you out. We want to augment you. We want to make you better, so you can focus on other parts of the company. I think that's really important. Maybe sort of, that needs to be a bigger message, even on social media about AI. I look at social media at the moment, and you can see why people get very stressed about social media and why they get stressed about AI, because some of the claims that are being made by companies all around in different industries do make you think that way. So I think it's really important to balance that out. And I think these conversations are really good in terms of getting some framework behind, what does digital adoption mean, or AI adoption mean for your company realistically, and what we want it to do as well. Brilliant session. Thanks so much, Rob. Masterfully moderated, as I expected, and great panelists on there as well.